Heavenly Father, we just come before you today with bowed hearts, and we just praise your mighty name, Yahuwah Sevaot, our LYHUH. Abba, we just thank you and praise you for blessing us with this new day. We thank you for giving us all the opportunity to dive deeper into your word, to learn more of your heart so that we can be on an intimate level that most people don't even know. So, Abba, we ask that you open the hearts of many through this teaching so that they can know that there are certain aspects that you expect your kingdom people to honor and revere and abide by. So we thank you for teaching us all your ways. We thank you for teaching us your language. And we thank you for giving us your ancient tongue back onto your people in this day. Even though the world is dark, Abba, you have given Israel the light. And so we praise you for this blessing that you have put upon us. We just ask that you cover us with your hand and protect us and guard us from all the things that your truth is bringing to light today. Abba, thank you for not allowing the enemy to penetrate us, but to allow us to be alert and aware of all the greatness of what you're bringing, which is your kingdom and yourself upon this land. So we thank you and we praise you with all that we are and all that we do, because without you, we have nothing. So we thank you for giving us this opportunity to walk with you and to be intimate with you. What an honor, Yah. Thank you for this day. Just thank you for being a God who wants his people and his people want him. Thank you for showing us your ways. In your precious name, amen.
Amen. So here is part 1 today of more GABOR. You could say more of the study of the GABOR LYHUH. I was looking through some Psalms. We're going to be getting into Psalms 119 here pretty soon. And David, I believe, had a good, not just a glimpse, but a good handle on, a good understanding of this stuff we're talking about. How do you do it? How do we be who he wants us to be and do that successfully, actually? And I was kind of running through kind of quickly first 20-something Psalms. Typically, if you read the Psalms, it's poetry, it's lyrics of music, it's a contemplation, it's an idea. Sometimes it's provoked by David being in adverse circumstances where his enemies seem to overwhelm him. He's got some situation and he's expressing that, and then he's expressing his hope, and then he's stating, as a matter of fact, that Yahuwah is going to intervene in his behalf. And you can say, well, that's a statement of faith. It's a mind to take on, mindset, an affirmation, you might say. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Specifically, we're going to zero in on 3 things, a 4th thing here momentarily. One of the things is what is a pondering, a train of thought, of affirmation, of who you are. What does that mean? We'll talk about that. Look at Psalms 11:7 and Psalms 14:7. But first, I'm going to look at Psalms 22, verse 30. Get back up to verse 29. Well, verse 28. So this is at the tail end of the Psalms 22, so we're missing all the stuff that he's talking about. But verse 28 says, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn back to Yahuwah. All the families of nations will bow down before you. Well, is that just David's pipe dream? Oh, one of these days, everybody, or is he saying, as a statement of prophecy, which is the word chet Zion or chet Zion hey, chazah, vision, a prophecy. He sees this. He can picture this happening. Mind's eye, or was he given a glimpse? The point is, all the ends of the earth, that would be typically the word kuf zadi, kutz. This says all the aleph pei somic of the arrests. Well, ephus, that's aleph pei somic. Hang on. So I hadn't planned on talking about this exactly, but just so we know what he's talking about, if we look up aleph pei somic, aleph pei somic means come to an end or cease, reduced to nothing, annihilated, nullified, zero to be zeroed out. And not means however, ankle. So even if you weigh hundreds of pounds, your ankle reduces down to you're down to nothing. There's your foot. That's the concept picture. Nothingness, nullity, insignificance or futility, insignificant, nihilism, ends of the earth, page 48 in Klein's dictionary. But it also means supply for an army. So is it nothing or is it something? Purveyor, caterer, aleph pei somic, ephus nun aleph yod, quartermaster, one who's responsible for all the provisions. So my point is, if he says all the ends of the earth will remember and turn back to Yahuwah, you could say at the time of the end of the earth, the last days, or when all the endeavors of the earth have, hey, let's go explore this, let's go try to scientifically understand that, let's do this art, let's do this invention, and everybody gets to the point where they look at it and go, well, that was much to do about nothing. Shakespeare's quote, but it's like, where is their substance? Might be talking about that. They will remember, that's the word zakar, and teshuv, turn back to Yahuwah. All the families of nations will bow before you. So to bow, it's like, is everybody who's even the dead will arise from the dead and kneel? Well, perhaps. But the idea of bowing before him is coming to the conclusion or admitting or saying, everything is futility except you, Yahuwah. Nothing else has what we had hoped to find. In the accomplishment of the goal of our pursuits, we found that there was nothing. Reminds me of a story somebody told me probably 40 years ago. Somebody at the church, I don't know if it was turned into a book or something, but I remember Hollywood location, a lot of people in the entertainment industry down there in that particular church I was going to. And so there's this story of caterpillars. Caterpillars walking along and nice day, and all of a sudden he sees this rush, this mad rush of hundreds of all these other caterpillars running to a certain direction. It's like, well, what's going on? There must be something interesting, not fleeing from, but going to. So they go there, and there's this tower of caterpillars as high up as you can see, and they're all like this column. They're all climbing on each other, climbing up, and it's like, what's up there? It's like, oh, whatever you thought you were looking for is that's what's up there. And it's like, what are we looking for? It's up there. Everybody's scrambling, and they're climbing on each other in this frenzy to get up to the top. And other caterpillars are falling off, boom, from way up there. And the caterpillar's feet in their face and knocking the other guy back, and they're crawling and they're scrambling. And so this caterpillar, whoa, wow, okay, I got to join this scramble, this pursuit. And when he finally gets up to the top of this column way high up there, well, there's nothing up there except for another caterpillar behind you trying to pull you off so that he can get up there. And then somebody else pulls him off so that they can get up there. And it's just like, what's up here? Ephus, nothing. They all thought there was something there. And they all were told by others, oh, this is where it is. And that was supposed to be this kind of metaphor of the Hollywood entertainment industry from the perspective of this Christian church. For the hiding place, that was where that was at. But anyway, this verse 28 is kind of describing that. And they're saying to bow before you is perhaps physically, but at least with the understanding or with the perspective of saying Yahuwah is the only achievement, the only goal, the only pursuit, the only destination, the only aim, the only satisfaction. What does that mean? Oh Lord, my Lord, how wonderful you are. Is that? See, the name Yahuwah, Yod He Vav He, regardless of how you pronounce it, Yehovah, Yahweh, whatever. Pick your own favorite way if you want. But what does it mean? I was told 25 years ago that somebody said, well, those 4 letters mean the omnipotent, infinite one, creator of all things, who causes himself to exist. That's what the name Yod He Vav He means. When I first started going to this Torah study, Christian-based studying of the Torah, and I remember looking at those 4 letters, modern Hebrew, and saying, how do those 4 letters mean all that? And the person said, well, they just do, that's whatever. It's like the omnipotent, eternal, creator of all things, who causes himself to exist. And that was actually, you might say, the very beginning of my intrigue, interest, pursuit of what's in a word. How do you decipher the language? So to turn back to Yahuwah and bow before him does not mean you become a Jew, nor does it mean you become a Christian. Does it mean that you turn back to Yahuwah, you return to the Old Testament covenant, in spite of the fact that in Jeremiah 31, he says, okay, you guys broke the original covenant, so no more of that. I'm going to make a new covenant, not like the old covenant. It's like, well, what does that mean? Well, how do you turn back? The word teshuv is turn back. Shin vav bet. Shin bet is an old man, or one who returns, like another trip around the sun, as they say, even though if you look at some scientists, nobody's traveling around the sun. The sun is moving across space, and the planets are all in this spiral following it in its wake, as it were, not solar system was spinning. And if it's geocentric instead of heliocentric, we're not even doing that. But the point is, one who returns to come back another year. So the word shuv, shin bet or shin vav bet, also means to be taken into captivity or to come back from captivity, to repent, to rebel, to return and sit, or to have remorse. It's something. It's to come back around from something to something. So what is Yahuwah? Well, the name, if you look at the spelling of the name, Yud, He Vav He, Yud is a prefix letter, which basically means he will, but it's not always third person he will. If you look at the way it's translated, quite often it's something else, maybe even talking about myself doing something, but it's this projection of somebody responsible for an action, you could say. Well, what's hey, vav, hey then? Well, as we've said many times, any word spelled with yuds, heys, and vavs always is the verb to exist. And you can even throw alepphs and tavs into that mix of yuds, heys, and vavs, and it's still pretty much always the verb to exist in one capacity or another. So that's where you say he will, yud, cause to exist, hey, vav, hey. So the he will cause is the action of the yod, hey, vav, hey, to exist. Cause what to exist? Everything, including himself. That's where they come up with that. And there's not a whole lot more that you can prove from that to get to that. But you could look at hey, vav, hey. You say, well, how is that the verb to exist? The letter vav, I draw it, you might say, like the shape of this menorah here. The center column and then the sweeping arc. Well, there's 3 on the menorah, but that's basically the shape of the letter vav that I use. And there's other shapes of the letter vav, but why that one? Remember, Moshe was still in control of the military and the whole nation, and they were engaged in a certain battle. And he was standing up on a hill overlooking, and they noticed whenever he raised up his hands in prayer or in praise, Israel would push the tide against the enemy. And when his arms got tired and he set him down, then the enemy kind of swelled back, kind of like the ebb and flow of tide water. How many times did that happen? And they had a couple guys with them, and they said, hey, wait a minute. There's something going on here. So they had him, he was tired standing there all day, so he sat down on a rock, and they propped up his hands, one on either side of him. And as his hands stayed up in the air, Israel was prevailing and actually won the battle. And people are getting killed and chopped up with the swords. And it's like, wait a minute. So people noticed that when Moshe did a certain physical behavior, something in real life happened. Well, what do you do with that? Do you make up a rule, a law that says, okay, every time we go into battle, the boss, the general, or somebody better be standing up on the hillside with their hands up? Does that become a behavioral talisman? Does it become a superstition? Oh, every time I wear this, have this lucky rabbit's foot in my pocket, then something good will happen. Every time I say some scramble of phonetic words, whether it's a real language or make something up, every time I say that, something good happens. I remember I was in high school. It was Baptist high school, so it was Christian, but I was like in 11th grade or something. Somebody said, hey, have you heard this phrase? And it's like, what? I can't remember what the phrase, but it was something like Naharamjiku, or it's like, what? Is it Japanese or something Oriental, or was it Buddhist? And it's like, hey, whenever you say this word, if you drive into a parking lot, a parking space will open up, or you come up to a red light, boom, the thing will turn green. It's like, really? And so people started saying this, and I don't know how many people, but I remember that it was an issue. It was a thing. I didn't do that. I can't remember how to say the phrase, but I remember taking note at the time. It's like, is that real? Does stuff happen like that? Is the universe built by Elohim to accommodate such things in reality? Well, if it is, it's no different than Moshe holding up his hands, the shape of the letter Vav, because see, the meaning of the letter Vav is a hook or a nail, which is a connector, maybe a tent peg. So you have a rope and you connect the tent to the earth. But if it's a nail or a hook or a connector, then technically a bridge spanning across a river is a Vav, something that attaches. And you could say, well, the affection of my heart is a Vav. I'm attached because I like the taste of this food, or I prefer the sound of this music, or I really want this thing, so my wanting is a Vav. See, the Vav is simply the concept of being attached. And so if you look at the shape of the Vav in a symmetrical shape, like it's almost like a wishbone shape, you could say. Here's the vertical part and the two equal other sides. Okay, well, that's the span, and that's a singularity. And it's like, and then there's that place in Daniel 12 where Daniel says, and I saw the one standing above the waters of the river. So there's a man standing, and he has his right hand and his left hand raised up, and he swore by him who lives forever. Well, that's kind of the shape of a man with his hands up. That'd be the Vav, and the word to swear, well, that's the number 7, Shin Bet Ayin. So he was referring to the guy that previously said, I saw one standing above the waters of the river, and that was in the 4th position, the Dalit position. It says, hey, how long to the end of these wonders? So there's a hey, and then the Vav. So I made a correlation. That's a whole other study that we've talked about. But so I'm making the correlation here that the same reference of the guy in the Dalit position is also in the Vav position, and he's standing there looking like this. That's why I use the shape of the letter Vav I use, just so you know. Other people use different shapes, which are not symmetrical, but whatever. It looks like a coupling mechanism, like the yod, the arm, forearm, upper arm coming down, the forearm coming out, and then that shape, and then the Vav like this shape that's like a train coupling device. And yod is a hand that grabs, and the kaf is the open hand or cupped hand, but the yod is the grabby, holding, powerful excavator claw hand, and you could see it easily grasp onto the Vav. Picture concepts. Well, if you go back, let's go jump back into Psalms 22 here. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn back to Yahweh. All the families of the nations will bow before you. Somehow they're bowing before Yod He Vav He. And the Vav, if it's this Messiah figure, as per Daniel 12, the one standing above waters of the river, who's the Dalit, and here he is the Vav, and that Vav has 2 He's, that makes me think of the Transfiguration, where Yeshua went up to the mountain, then here's Moshe and Elisha, LYHUH. That's the man with 2 witnesses, because a He is basically a declaration, a revelation, a shining, hey, look, this pointing to something, and that's like these 2 witnesses. And then there's a Torah instruction that says, if you take a matter to court, one person can't accuse another and necessarily win. There's got to be 2 or more witnesses. So to have 2 witnesses of an event, well, here you have the crucifixion also, which is a pictorial similarity to the Transfiguration. Only you've got Yeshua hung between 2 thieves. Well, a thief is usually a liar and maybe a killer. Certainly he's killing somebody's heart, killing somebody's trust. Ephraim was accused of lying, killing, and stealing by Yahweh. That's Yahuwah's complaint against his people. You guys have this constant tendency to lie, kill, and steal. Well, that was the problem with the earth in the days of Noah. Evil, wicked, harm, constantly only evil in their hearts every day. And Yahweh got so sickened by it, he said, that's it, I'm going to kill them all. Well, that's his people's tendency, Ephraim. See, when the land of Canaan was inhabited after Noah, after the flood, they started building cities and this and that, and they weren't necessarily walking in the ways of Yahuwah, but they weren't necessarily doing too bad of stuff. And Abraham, about 500 years later, Yahweh said, well, you're going to come back and inherit as your heritage this land, but not now. It's going to be 430 years from now. So the descendants of Abraham end up going to Egypt and incubating there. They turned into slaves. They weren't slaves originally. They didn't necessarily have to be slaves. That's another part of the story. But it was 430 years later that they came back. And Yahweh says, now the cup of their iniquity is full. The Canaanites. And when the cup of their iniquity is full, even the very land itself will spew them out. The land can't tolerate their abiding on it. That's the way the universe is built. So too then Yahweh said of his people later, he said, you know, I brought you guys in here and I was going to clear out the Canaanites before you, and they didn't trust him, so they had to walk 40 more years in the wilderness. But nevertheless, by the time they came in and he cleared them all out, the Israelites ended up doing worse, more evil than even the Canaanites. The land can't tolerate it. Yahuwah can't tolerate it. And he said, this is not the reason I gave you this land, this heritage. This is not why I gave you my covenant to be my people, is so that you could do this kind of stuff. You're out of here. And he brought this great devastation upon his people, leaving a remnant. He would not quench Israel 100%. That's the bulk of the story of the whole, what we call the Old Testament. Well, and then what? He scattered them out across the face of the earth, but he said he was going to bring them back. And people I've talked to, things that I've learned throughout the years of being in church, everybody seems to forget that he's going to bring back the 12 tribes. Oh, a few Jews came back, and yeah, that if you come back at all, if you teshuva, if you return, you're automatically called a Jew. That's the way it works. And so any of the miscellaneous 12 tribes scattered across the face of the earth, if they come back to the Torah, if they come back to regarding Old Testament stuff, they're classified JEW, and look, he's fulfilled his promise. No, that's not how it works. Not in my regard. From what I read, that's not how it works at all. There's 12 tribes. And even though somebody came out with a book called Exodus 2 in the 1980s somewhere, and they said, hey, look, there's this airlift from Russia and from Yemen and Ethiopia and all these people that didn't remember at all that they were Jews, but they had some kind of Jewish or Hebraic heritage, and they're coming from all these other nations, and they come back to Israel, and they become Jews. And it's like, that's not what this is about. See, the political entity, the culture of Judaism, of Israeli, is not necessarily the same thing as returning to Yahuwah. So what does it mean to return to Yahuwah? Well, what's in his name? If there's a picture of Yeshua hanging between two thieves, or Jesus hanging between two thieves, who is that? These guys will bear witness of him. You've got two thieves and liars, maybe murderers, bearing witness of are they telling the truth about him? Moshe and Eliyahu bearing witness of Yahusha. Now that's true, but I don't know if I could believe that these other two religious groups can validate or authenticate who he is. Because the Jews will tell you that he's not worth listening to, and the Christians will misrepresent him. So who is this figure in the middle? The Vav between the two Hays. Is he God? He said, Yahusha said, I only do what I see my Father doing, and I only say what I hear my Father saying. And he also referred to my Elohim and your Elohim, my Father and your Father. He didn't say, I am your Elohim, I am your Father. He never said that. He said, I and my Father are echad. That's one, that's singular. That means he is the Father. That's what we're told, but that's not necessarily the meaning of the word echad. Unified, non-distinct, meaning it's not a different. My Father says this, but I'm telling you that. No, that's not what he's doing. My Father has a tendency to behave like this, but I'm going to do this. No, that's not what he's doing. That's not echad. So what's the meaning of echad? And then you might get a preacher or some professor or some smart guy telling you, oh, this is what it really means. And it's like, is that true? You have to figure out for yourself what is the truth. But the point is, for the people to return to Yahuwah, to return, they must have been there before. Get back, Jojo, to where you once belonged. Didn't the Beatles say something about that? To where you once belonged. Well, then that's the offcast 12 tribes. 10 tribes, but the Jews came back, or some of them came back, and then there's the question of the Khazarians. Like, are those really Jews? That's a whole other matter. The family of Rothschild, when the great Lord Baron Rothschild was near his death, he said, "My family is responsible for Israel being a nation right now." I've mentioned before this book called The Chosen by a man named Chaim Potok, written in about 1950. Staged in America, two rabbis. It's kind of like one Catholic and one Protestant in the Christian world, but apparently among the Jews, there's just as many various divisions, or call it denominations. And one said, "Hey, look, we're back in the land. It's a fulfilling a prophecy. Look, the Jews have the homeland back." And the other guy said, "That's not the way it's supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen that Mashiach, Messiah, gave us the land back, and we are all honoring the Torah. This is all a Luciferic, Illuminati, British Roman conspiracy of what? Yeah, but we have the land. Yeah, but that's not a fulfillment of the prophecy." Well, but and the book ends with this controversy. Rabbi Jonathan Cahn wrote a book about, forget what it's called. Anyway, he's written a number of books, but he was talking about, hey, look at the names of the guys and the dates and the license plate on the Jeep that they were driving, and all these things are telling this story that validates that this is all of God. Well, it's coincidental, but I don't necessarily agree with Jonathan Cahn. What does it mean to turn back to Yahuwah? And if it's, some say that the word Yod Vav means hand behold, nail behold. So the Yod is a grabby hand, and the Hey is, hey, illuminate, hey, look, see this, check this out. And then the Vav is the nail. So you could say Yod Hey is, hey, the Yod, behold the hand. And then Hey of the Vav is, behold the nail. Behold the nail, behold the hand. Or vice versa, behold the hand, behold the nail. Hey, that's like the crucifixion. But I could also look at Yod He Vav He as being, well, the hand of the grabby hand. That's the hand of the artist, the builder, the one who made this place, the creator's hand. And then the Hey of the Yod is the expression, the declaration. What did he build, and what does it say? Well, the expression of saying, the creator's telling us, illuminating, that's Torah. Vav, well, the Vav is the sixth letter, and Vav, they say, is a man, but the Vav is the masculine suffix, and it means to attach. The word Zakar, Gabor, like Gabor Yahweh, that's man. Anash is man. Zakar, Zayin Kaf Resh, is man. It also means to remember and commemorate, memorialize, to stick in your mind like a burr of a thorn. It's also man. So if the Vav is the man, that's the Mashiach, that's Yahusha. And then the Hey of the Vav, remember before he left, he said, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to send the Comforter. I'm going to send, as typically understood, the Ruach HaKodesh. So I can read Yod-Heh Vav-Heh as the Creator, the Torah, the Messiah, and the Spirit, the Ruach. Well, those are four provisions of guidance that he's given us. And I know that if you want to do map work, locating where you are, if you're on the land and you triangulate from three different directions, you can pinpoint. GPS does something like that. And I've been told if you're out in outer space, three lines won't work. You need four. Well, there's Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. Four. So if all four expressions agree, what did the Creator build? What does the Torah say? What did Mashiach validate to us? And what is the Ruach leading us to walk in his ways of righteousness? And when all four of those voices agree, that's Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. That's what I choose to see in the meaning of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. So if somebody says the Spirit of God, the Hey of the Vav, is better than the Torah, the Hey of the Yod, And he'll tell us to do stuff that's not even written in there. Well, maybe, but it can't disagree. But see, if they're echad, then they can't be better. So the Vav, if that's the Messiah, and if the Yod is the hand of the Creator, let's say it's the Father's hand. Some people say Messiah was the Creator. Some people say the Father is the Creator. So that's a whole other discussion. But the point is, they can't disagree. They have to be all four of an echad voice. And if one of them's out of whack, I'm suspicious that something not right here. There's something untrue, because they all four have to be echad. So that means for me to consider that Yud He Vav He is the consideration of truth. Is something true? Well, what did he build into creation? He built into creation so that even a woman who, somebody who is being considered for the Supreme Court judgeship in the United States can't define the difference between a man and a woman because she's not a biologist. Does it take a biologist? Even those don't know. So that's not what he built. He says he made man and woman. That's what it says in the Torah, that the Creator made man, male and female. So if the Creator made Adam, male and female, that's what the Torah says. Well, there's the Yod and there's the He. And if Messiah can validate that somehow, then the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, has to have us walk in that. And if somebody else comes up and says, I don't know, that's not necessarily true, then it's like, then you don't represent the truth. Why would you give them a job then as the Supreme Court justice who will determine truth and reality? Isn't there a disconnect? Does it get into politics? Does it get into some other consideration? I don't know. That's a different matter. But I'm just trying to illustrate the usefulness of the consideration. So if somebody says, I don't need the Old Testament, I have Jesus and the Holy Spirit, well, that's Vav and He. What about Yod He? Well, the only way to recognize Yod is to observe creation. My estimation, it's like, well, the one who put the rules, the laws of the stars, the sun and the moon, the seasons. Why does the ecological system work the way it does? Everything's built according to a certain system and a certain pattern that works. And if someone can observe creation, they should be able to see the Yod, the true Yod. And if they see an anomaly or, hey, why isn't that working like that? Look closer and you'll find a mystery of how things really work. Because what he built into the creation, then you see a verse that says, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim. That means somehow we should be able to say the glory, the kavod of Elohim is in the orchestration. Well, that's like intelligent design. That movie called Expelled, Ben Stein was in that movie back, I think it was in the 90s, and pretty interesting movie. But anyway, the point is, it was like a documentary. Tenured professors in Britain and the USA were getting fired, expelled, for talking, even mentioning the phrase intelligent design. You're out of here. It's like, aren't we allowed to think? Aren't we allowed to talk? Aren't we allowed, especially at university, to consider the possibilities? No, you're not allowed to talk or think about that stuff. Well, then they're shutting the door on the Yod. And they're saying, you will only teach our presumptions. But isn't science observation of what is and then trying to figure out why it is, how it works? Isn't that how we discover mathematical equations, chemistry, physics, biology, and such? Well, then what's the He, the Torah? And if somebody says, oh, that was all done away with. Well, if they're going to return to Yod He Vav He, if Yod He Vav He means the Creator, the Torah, the Messiah, the Ruach, it's not done away with. And if he gave us something that's solid, that's enduring, that's lasting, that's Yod Tav Nun, He's got their motorcycle going. Sorry about that. But the idea is that the word Yod Tav Nun means perpetual, ever-flowing. And I think it's also the word for tonic, which is to say that by which you can recover and gain strength. So if Yahuwah's stuff, that's in, I think it's in Psalms 11:7, we're going to look at that word. The point is to believe that Yahuwah's stuff is Yatan, perpetual and overflowing, because he is. And that's what he built into the universe. Then if we look at what works in the universe, it works that way because he made it that way. So if somebody gets into magic, sorcery, witchcraft, well, that's all invented stuff. No, it's not. The only reason that stuff works is because Yahweh built it and it works. But see, then he tells Israel, you don't deal with that. Just like you, Israel, do not eat pork or shellfish or any fish that doesn't have fins and scales, and don't eat, you might say, scavenger birds. Don't eat any animal that doesn't chew the cud and have a split hoof. Just don't do it. You'll become abominated. Well, you can eat anything. You can put food in your mouth and swallow it, and it becomes you, because that's what he built. But then the Torah is to say, then a filter on what's yoded. The Hey Torah of the Yod creation is a filter for his people. Well, then what's Vav? Is it a filter on the Torah? The teachers of the Torah in the day of Yahusha, known as the Sanhedrin or the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the priests, the leaders, the teachers of the day, had brought some other stuff in that they thought sounded pretty good, or maybe they had an agenda, but Yeshua said, things have gone astray, I'm here to correct it. So he was a filter on the hay, such as it was presented, and then Yeshua himself has become interpreted by thieves and liars. And so the hay, the ruach that he has given us, he said, will lead you into the truth. What truth? The truth of how to halakha the yashar derek, walk on the straight path of righteousness. That's the ruach's function. Well, if you have a whole bunch of people that are not walking on the straight path of righteousness, what went wrong? Is the ruach not doing his job? Or you could say, no, the ruach is doing his job. That's why we're believing these things and doing these things. That's the ruach, the Holy Spirit, is doing his job of leading us into the truth. That's why we don't regard the Torah anymore. That's just for them stupid Jews. I've heard that said. No, that's not what's happening. Then you must have a fake Holy Spirit. Because if Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, Yod equals Hey equals Vav equals Hey, then the Hey of the Vav, the Ruach HaKodesh, Hey equals Hey. So if the Torah is Hey and the Ruach is Hey, they're both identical, aren't they? Pattern of my own ponderings. So I choose to believe that the Ruach is identical to the Torah. In fact, the Ruach HaKodesh, if he's going to lead us how to walk in the ways of righteousness, you realize 1 John and Psalms defines righteousness as doing what Yahweh said. Doing good. No, doing what he said is righteousness. Not doing what he said is unrighteousness, or doing what he said not to do is unrighteousness. If he says don't eat pork, and we say, well, Jesus said we could, so we're going to eat pork, that's unrighteous. And that's a fake Jesus, in my estimation, but somebody else disagrees with me. It's like, well, I'm just trying to validate, what did the Creator build? The pork will abominate you, and the Torah say, don't eat it because it'll abominate you. And then we're told that the Messiah said, it's not what goes into your mouth, it's what comes out of your mouth. You can eat whatever you want. That can't be true, so I'm going to choose to believe that is a mistranslation, a lie, a corruption of the gospel text. Based on what authority or evidence? That it disagrees with the Torah of the Creator's construction of certain animals to be cleaners of the earth. And so I pictured, just to help me hold on to that, if you vacuum up a bunch of filth in a room and then take out the bag of the vacuum cleaner and use it as a tea bag, seeping it in water and pouring out tea, it's like, what are you doing? That's what pigs do. That's what oysters do. That's what catfish do. They clean the environment, filtering it, and then for us to eat those creatures is like making tea out of the vacuum bag. So I'm not going to do it. Because besides that, you always said not to, but that means I have to now be suspicious of the translation of the gospel, because what the words they stick in Yeshua's mouth can't be true. But they're true because that's what Jesus said, and it says so right there. So I have to then make a distinction between Jesus and Yahusha. Yahusha has to only say what his Father says. Jesus can make up stuff or whatever. So is the evidence declare. What does it mean to return to Yahuwah? It's this stuff, I believe. All the families of nations will yield, will drop to their knee and say, okay, you're right. We're scoundrels. We've been teaching a bunch of bogus nonsense because we're making money, or we thought it was true, or it sounded good, or we just didn't want to keep that law. It's so irritating. Or whatever the reason is. They will finally capitulate and say, okay. And they will admit that Yod-He Vav-He is the one and only bearing reference of truth, of reality, of success. It goes on to say, verse 29 of Psalms 22, for the kingship belongs to Yahuwah, and he rules the nations. Well, except for the fact that the earth belongs to the devil, right? Adam was given lordship of the earth, and he gave it over to the devil, and so now the devil's the prince of the power of the air, and he rules the earth. And I mentioned, like last week, the week before, it's like, no, I disagree. It says right here, the kingship belongs to Yahuwah, and he rules the nations. Also, Psalms 24 says, belonging to Yahuwah is the earth and its fullness, the inhabited land, and those who dwell in it, because he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers of the floods. He built it, he owns it. I'm not going to, in my mind, give any place to, oh yeah, but it's owned by the devil. No, I think that's a bad doctrine, misrepresenting authority, what's going on. So part of the return is going back to what is the kingship of Yahuwah? Not Jesus is the king of kings, but something about the kingship of Yahuwah. He rules the nations. Well, Jesus and the Father are one and the same, so Jesus is the king that rules the nations. Like, that's Christian, okay, but what does this mean? I have to understand what this means, and then I can take that, you might say, the New Testament concept of the Vav-He. If this is Yod-He, then I need to pin the Vav-He. See, the Vav is the connector. The Yod is that which is established, that builds it, that holds it, and the Vav connects to the Yod. Pictures in my mind based on the shape of the letters and the meaning of the letters. He rules the nations. Verse 30, all the fat ones of the earth will eat and bow down. All who descend to the dust will kneel before him, but he will not revive each one's soul. The next verse in the Stones Tanakh here, they have asterisk. And if you look down at the notes in the bottom of the page here, rabbinical commentary, these two verses say, the prosperous nations who were all destined for the grave and for mortality will return to God, and their repentance will be accepted. But there are those among them who will descend to the grave and whose souls he will not revive, even though they now kneel before him. These are the ones whose hands are stained with Jewish blood. It says Radak, which was the name of one of the rabbis who, that's his teaching on this matter. It's like, That's not necessarily the full measure of what's in this verse, but just so you know, that's the way the Stone Tanakh is written. Then the next verse, even though all mankind will eventually return to God, Israel will remain foremost among them. What about the church? What about Rome? So when I was talking the other day about Christians don't seem to remember or don't even have it in their mind that it's an issue, that the Jews believe that they will be the preeminent nation on the face of the earth and the Gentiles will be their slaves, their servants. Where do they get that? Right here. This is one of the places. Verse 31, about the seed of those who have served him, it will be told of the Lord to the latter generation. What does that even mean? We're going to look at that in a second here. About the seed of those who have served him. Well, that's about the offspring, the progeny, the children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren of those who have served him, the offspring of those who have served him, it will be told of the Lord to the latter generation. Is there a Lord of the latter? No, to the latter generation. Again, absolute nonsense. I can't make any sense out of that. We're going to look at it in a second. The last verse of Psalms 22, they will come and relate his righteousness to the newborn nation, that which he has done. To the newborn nation, is that the restored nation of Israel? The newborn nation. Well, then that's where it's talking about all the ends of the earth will remember and turn back to Yahuwah. All the families of nations will restore the nation of Israel. So someone was asking, where does it talk about the greater Exodus, the second Exodus? Ezekiel 37 is one place, two sticks coming together. This is another, a little bit harder to see, but it's another mention of that. And so then the question is, well, when is this going to happen? I was talking to somebody who says, well, that's after the tribulation. That's during the time of the tribulation, the Christians, the believers are taken away. There's the tribulation on the earth for the Jews who don't receive him. And then there's this 1,000-year reign. But other people have said anybody who thinks that the 1,000-year reign is on earth is an infidel. Because Jesus said, my kingdom's not of this world. If his kingdom's not of this world, it's in the by and by in the clouds in the sky or somewhere. Well, then when's this? What newborn nation? See, this stuff has to make sense somehow. So there seems to be this idea that everybody's going to come back to Yahuwah. And even people who were wealthy and successful and perhaps rulers of what? Corporations, of countries? The fat, meaning those who have absorbed a lot of wealth, success, who have consumed the resources of the earth, even they will drop to their knees and bow down. But Yahuwah's going to revive some and not the others. Who's he going to revive? Then there's a bunch of various psalms where David says he's going to revive the ones who have worshiped him, who have made Yahuwah their consideration while they've walked the earth. And then here, verse 31, about the seed of those who have served him. So if we look at that, just as the words written down, the word serve is obed, which is where we get the word obedience. Obadiah. The word seed is Zion Resh Ayin, which is offspring, progeny, that which is you throw the seed, you get from the fruit. You got to keep going back. When Yahuwah built plants, he had them bear fruit whose seed DNA to perpetuate the generations, thrown into the future. Each generation is called a dar, either Dalet Resh or Dalet Vav Resh. Dalet Vav Resh is also a circle, a circuit. It also means to abide or dwell. So it's like the next era of those who get to walk the earth, who get to dwell on the earth. That's a Dalet Vav Resh. But if you look at the dictionary, Dalet Vav Resh is also some type of a gift. So you could say, why does to dwell, a gift, a circle, a circuit? Well, each generation is given a gift to abide on the earth for this duration. In fact, we get the word duration from the word dalet vav resh, which is a generation. How long does a generation endure? It's circuit time, the time of its average of 70 years nowadays, about the seed of those who have served him. But see, all it says here, if you look at it in Hebrew, is Zayin Resh Ayin, Yod, Ayin Bet Dalet Nun Vav. About the seed of those who have served them. It doesn't say all that. It just says Zerah, which is seed, or to cast seed, and then Yod, Obed, Nu. Well, Nun Vav means us. Obed is the word obedience or worship, and Yod means he will. So you could say we who worship. The thrown out seed, we who worship, our obedience. Here's the next word, Yod Samik Peresh. Well, the Yod prefix means he will, so the verb action is Sefer, Samik Peresh, which is where we get in English the word cipher, which means to connect the dots. You look at the dictionary definition of Sefer, and it's a narrative. It's like making a fence line on your property. You put a post and another post and you string wire, or build a stone wall or a wooden fence between the posts. If you're an empire, you have a fort and another fort and another fort, an imaginary line or a wall perhaps, or held by sentries who keep an eye on the line between the fortresses. That's all sephering. So to connect the dots of the stars is sepher. The word sepher also means to count. But that means, so we in this study call sephering connecting the dots, or making sense of how the letters are connected, both in the alphabetic sequence and in spelling words. That's sephering. The ing is the English suffix to the Hebrew word samik peresh, which is that. So he was saying that the thrown seed, is that the offspring? But if you throw seed as a picture, yeah, it's talking about offspring, but it's also talking about the DNA in the fruit, the seed in the fruit. But see, we're supposed to bear fruit. Now I'm going to do some suffering here. You go to Galatians 5:22. Well, that's New Testament. Yeah, but it says the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace. And there's DNA, there's a list of 9 things. Patience, kindness, temperance, self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit. And it's like, well, fruit's supposed to have DNA within it. And that you cast forward is the seed that's in the fruit. So does that mean that Zion Resh Ayin doesn't have to necessarily be offspring, meaning another generation of people? But it means that which will come from bearing the fruit that has the seed, that will yield another crop, a benefit of productivity 30, 60, and 100-fold. Well, if I apply that to Galatians 5:22, then if I conduct myself in the behavior, the mentality of love, joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, mercy, self-control, endurance, then the Zion Resh Ayin, as I am being obedient to him, is that I will be able to sephir. If I try to deconstruct this sentence or look at the engineering of this sentence, that's what it's saying. And then it says, La Adonai Lador, and it's translated, it will be told to the Lord of the latter generation. Well, see, they're translating the word sephir as it will be told. Sephir doesn't mean it'll be told. Oh, it means you can tell a story if you connect the dots, but it doesn't just mean it'll be told. To the Lord, Lamed Aleph Dalet Nun Yod, La Adonai. But see, the lamed prefix means belonging to. Ani ladodi, I am belonging to my beloveds, vedodi li, my beloved belongs to me. Lamed yod means my, it belongs to me. So here, lador, it belongs to the door, which is generation, but you can look at dalet vav resh, like I said in the dictionary, it also means a gift, and it means to abide for a while. So I could look at this and say, the seed to multiply for we who obey as an act of worship is that we will be able to sefer, which is a gift from Adonai. But the word Adonai, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yod is my, it's a personal suffix. Adon, Dan, Dalet, Nun means to be able to judge, or the one responsible for making a determination, like a Supreme Court justice, or like a referee in a game, an umpire. It's like your responsibility is to make the call, make the determination. But how can you do that unless you can see, unless you can sefer? But what's the problem? See, he's describing the problem is that everybody is running around and doing stupid stuff that wasn't true. And finally, everybody's going to come back to Yahweh and say, here's the truth. And the seed, the DNA within the fruit, well, that means those who are bearing the fruit, Yeshua said, I'm the vine and you're the branches, like this menorah. The branches have to have the same DNA as the vine. I mean, if they're grafted in and the fluid, the sap, the juice running through the tree conforms the grafted in to the host. But we have to adapt to his achadness, his people. There's one Torah for the native born and for the proselyte. The proselyte is the grafted in branch. They're not allowed to just bear their own fruit. They have to bear his fruit, achad with him. So they will be allowed or be given as a gift to be able to sefer. But it says, it will be told of the Lord to the latter generation. See, if I sit here and look at it in Hebrew, trying to make sense of these letters, connecting the dots to all these other things, I can wrap my mind around this where it means something. But if I just read the English translation, it means nothing. Then the last verse, 32, they will come. Who? The Obed, the Obedim, the ones that are obedient, bearing his fruit. They will come and relate his righteousness. Relate. What's that word? It's Vav, Yod, Gimel, Yod, Dalet, Vav. Well, the Vav prefix, and basically and the Vav suffix means his. So the word, the root word is Yod, Gimel, Yod, Dalet. Well, the Yod is a prefix, he will, and Gimel, Yod, Dalet. Well, hey, or Gimel, Dalet, hey, or hey, Gimel, Dalet, hey, Haggadah, or Gadah, Gimel, Dalet, hey. Well, those are three letters in the alphabetic natural sequence. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, hey, Gadah. What does that mean? It's a saga. It's a story. It's this legendary tale. What legendary tale? Well, we've talked all this time about reading the sequence of letters in the alphabet as the story, as the stepping stones of consciousness. To sefer the Aleph Bet is to tell the story one by one, connecting the dots to each other. So to be able to sefer the Haggadah, seeing that it's all about Yeshua, it's all about the Torah, it's what the Creator built. It is the Ruach, which is the expanse between Aleph and Tav. To Haggadah, to sefer the Haggadah of Aleph Tav. Those who are able to do this will come and relate his righteousness. And the word righteousness, Zadik, is not just righteousness. Oh yeah, he's a good guy. He doesn't do bad. Tzaddik is also victory, deliverance, justice, and salvation, success, accomplishment. It's where it all works like it's supposed to work. It brings the shalom, which is the tov, which is the fullness, surfeited, shin bet ayin. See, so if you study these words, you realize that's what shalom is about. That's what shin bet ayin is about. It's about where everything he made functions and works the way he made it. So when he's in Genesis 1 making everything, and he says, yeah, this is good. The word good is tov, tet vav bet, which means it works, it functions. Well, if he made seeds to be in the fruit, and then our brainiac scientists take the seeds out of the fruit, guess what? It's no longer tov. Doesn't work. So theoretically, even though he never said, thou shalt not eat fruit without seeds, I have in my mind that, by golly, if you can find a watermelon with seeds, eat that one. Don't eat the hybridized one, the GMO'd one that doesn't have seeds. It's like, well, do you have to eat the seeds? We always spit them out as kids, but then I've heard, oh no, all the good stuff is in the seeds. And it's like, oh, well, whether you eat the seeds or not, eat the fruit that has the seeds, because there's something different about the actual basar, the flesh, the bet shin resh of the fruit, who is still able to produce seed. And that's just a matter of understanding, what did Yahweh build into the universe? And so what this is talking about, that they will come, all the families of the nations will come and bow before him, and there's going to be a newborn nation. That which he has done, if you yield to Yodhe Vavhe, you're going to have to put the seeds back into the fruit. You're going to have to stop the scientific shenanigans that have been developed as a way of making money, and you might say expedience for greater yield of crops, because it's just wrong. And who's going to be able to do that? Well, it hasn't happened yet, so this can't be the end of the world. This still has to happen, in my sense. So for people to say, well, the rapture is imminent, the tribulation is imminent, the end of the world is upon us, Jesus should come back any day, we're going to fly up into the heavenly kingdom, and he's going to destroy this earth and bring the new heaven and new earth. And it's like, is that when this is talking about? When is this going to happen? Is this the nation of Israel? I don't think so. It's certainly not America. But see, so I have to look at this stuff and go, who are we and where are we? Well, one of these days, people have that frame of mind. Well, I can have this frame of mind right now. I can return to Yahuwah presently. In fact, you back up to verse 27, right before we read this, and back up to 26. For from you is my praise in the great congregation. I will fulfill my vows before those who fear him. David is saying, I will fulfill my vows. Well, then that's a pretty good idea. I should fulfill my vow. The word vow is shin bet ayin, and to fulfill your vow is also shin bet ayin. Same word. There's other words that mean to fulfill, like Yod Kaf Lamed is another one. But I'm just saying, you could, the whole idea, you could say Shavah Shavah, and that's I will fulfill my vow. The humble will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Yahweh will praise him. Your hearts will live forever. The humble will eat. That's verse 27. But the word for humble is ayin nun hey. In this case, ayin nun vav yod mem. And there was another place where it was ayin nun yod, and it's like the humble or the poor. That's verse 25. He has neither despised nor loathed the supplication of the poor. And you look at the word for poor, and it's ayin nun vav tav, ayin nun yod. Well, wait a minute. Which one of those is the word supplication and which one is poor? Well, you look in the dictionary and you realize that's the word used in Isaiah 58, I believe it was, where that's where he's saying ayin nun hey is the word for humble or to be impoverished. But it's also the word to respond, to reply, give answer, which is to say, I'm going to be making it my burden and obsession, even if I don't eat. It's the word translated, don't eat, fast on the day of Yom Kippur, but that's not necessarily what it means. It means I'm going to I'm going to make this more important than eating. I'm going to make this my obsession to think about these things, to determine these things, to get a grip of these things. And it should be more important than eating even what I eat. So it means to be oppressed and poor and humbled because you've taken it on as your burden. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you're poor, he has a particular eye for you. That's the way it seems to be translated. The supplication of those who have made his stuff their burden and their obsession. He will then attend to their burdens. That's a dynamic of the relationship. But you see, the only way to get that and see that is to look at the words. So the nice thing about Stone's Tanakh is that they got the English, and I can read the English. And then if something catches my eye, I can look it over here and try to figure out what is the word in Hebrew, and then what does it mean? The task of doing that is what they're talking about. That's the interesting irony of it, you might say. If I'm sitting there saying, gosh, what does this mean? And so I have to look at the words and spend hours trying to figure out what do these words mean, making sure I'm right, so I'm not being bamboozled or bewitched or deceived, led astray by either one of the lying thieves on either side of Yeshua, but I'm being led into truth, like by LYHUH and Moshe, referring to, what does it mean to be this Vav man? Vyodhe Vavhe. And as I ponder these things and look at these things, I realize I'm doing the very thing that David is doing, that's what he's talking about we should be doing, which is then described as the ultimate, the epitome of what his people do. For all the ends of the earth, even the wealthy, successful ones, to come back to Yahuwah and drop to their knees before him and say, look, we yield it all. Well, that's what this is to do. That's what this is doing. Come back to him, let go of what's in your mind. What did you learn? How do you think this place works? And you realize it works the way he built it to work and the way he said it should work. Anyway, we're at the edge of an hour here, so I'm going to go check downstairs. But when I come back, we'll get into Psalms 11:7 and Psalms 14:7, and then this other thing of affirmation of it as a train of thought that I wanted to go over.